Hello, I am Radagast with Shelley. Hello, Shelley.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, we might have a little bit of a delay, but this is Mystic View number 19. A look at the Lord of the Rings and the analogy of the time that of our times. I recently viewed Lord of the Rings again for the umpteenth time, and for some reason, it really struck me as to how um, analogous it is to the times of today. And I think the reason why it kind of fits is because Tolkien was really writing about what he was seeing back in his time. Now, Tolkien had been in World War One. World War One was probably one of the biggest losses of human life, in history up to that time. I think World War II managed to do more. And it's very interesting that World War I concluded with the Spanish influenza outbreak, which, from what I recall, killed anywhere from 1/10 to 1/4 of the world's population. So, in The Lord of the Rings, what gets identified is that there is an energy, an evilness that absolutely hates the planet and hates the beings that the creator put on the planet. In Lord of the Rings, that would be the elves, and that would be humans, or men, as it is called. And what we have amongst us, we have the humans. Now, in a certain case, we could have something that's almost analogous to the elves, in that we have the survivors of our last great cataclysm on this planet, which is, I guess we'll call it, the symbolism would be Atlantis. And in The Lord of the Rings, Atlantis is an island that was also sunk, and it's called Numenor. So anybody familiar with Lord of the Rings, and I'm hoping that I'm going to put Lord of the Rings in the title, so I'm hoping people who watch this are kind of familiar with some of the people. So Return of the King is one of the books. The Lord of the Rings is a trilogy, and Return of the King is one of the books. So the Return of the King is about a character called Strider or Aragorn, who was one of the descendants of Numenor, the old line. And even in the movie and in the extended versions, here you see what looks like this really dynamic, man could be probably no more in his 40s, and we find out he's 87 years of age. And here he is, robust and going. And that long life is kind of a signature of a race of men that had genetics that were different than common people. And so Tolkien, in his telling of The Lord of the Rings through fiction, is telling us a story about our times, a story that he saw starting to happen in World War One, where he grew up in rural England, and he saw just what seemed like mindless destruction of the environment to be replaced by industry, where people who had skills and crafts instead were now put in factories, basically kind of captured and enslaved. And of course, with the destruction of the environment comes the inability to live out of the environment that humans had done for millennia. I mean, the world, I don't know what your spiritual inclination is, but I believe the Creator created a world that was made to support us, and then we were put on the world, put on the planet, and to draw what we needed. We were given water. I mean, even in things like the Bible, the herbs of the earth were given to us. Water was given to us. The earth was given to us. And it was a matter of us using our skills, our work ethic, our genius to take what we needed and even build out from there. So clearly the destruction of nature is a destruction of our ability to sustain ourselves And so you start to see a kind of a strategy of the destruction of nature, the building of industry, and the need for jobs because nature has been removed and therefore our sustenance has been removed. I'll kind of pause there for a second, Shelley, and see if you want to bring anything in here.
Well, sure. One of the things that you just touched on was also to erode our God spark. So not only was the God element in the planet and in nature, but it's in us innately. We come with that God spark when we're born. So not only are they destroying nature, destroying the earth and our resources, but also trying to erode away that God spark that's within us. But what's really cool about Tolkien and many of the other writers, George Orwell, those fellows who foreshadowed for us or forecast, as Hollywood so often will do, to give us a little preview of what to expect.
Well,
there's something written into the ethics that tells them to give us a little forecast.
I just recently read an article, and it was specifically asking why do the elite tell us beforehand about what they're going to do, and it kind of really ties in with they actually acknowledge that free will is the province of us. It was given to us by the Creator, and so by forewarning us. And then us doing nothing about that warning turns into consent. And so therefore, all of these horrors that we go, oh, the Cabal is doing this, oh, no, they're doing this, we are kind of de facto consenting to by not even saying, no, not like basically not on my watch. It's like, ooh, basically we get this news and we go, oh, look what they're doing to us again. So that's consent.
Has to be a clause for, under duress or under fluoride. I don't see how that authentically can hold, but I do understand that's the premise they're working with. Yes. Well, I don't agree to it.
Yeah. Supposedly that's how they escape karma. They're kind of gaming the system. And I mean, TV, poor information from the TV and now the internet. And I guess I want to mention at this time, there's a YouTube channel called New Earth. And this is kind of basing off of, there's a man called Anatoly Fomenko. And Anatoly Fomenko has been conducting research on the anomalies in history. And he has concluded, and modern chronology in history is written by a German by the name of Joseph Scaliger. He kind of compiled, he took all of the old documents and kind of compiled them. I think this is in the 1500s. Compiled them and then created what we know as history. So he kind of did this with one other person. And so it turns out that our chronological, like what we think of as history, seems to be quite corrupted. There seems to be about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,800 years of history missing. And in many ways, what Western history was expanded and made longer. Like basically, he's kind of seems to think that the crucifixion of Christ occurred about 1,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago. So they kind of lengthened Western history and shortened Russian history. And if we look on old maps, we'll see that Russia used to be known as Tartaria. And it went all the way over as long as it was. And it was in maps until the 1800s. They demonstrate that they had coat of arms. I mean, and we don't hear much about this culture anymore. And so what we see is apparently something that happened around the time of the Reformation tied in with this retelling of history. So, and the other thing that seems to be indicated is so ancient Rome and ancient Greece were also about at least 1,000 years closer to the modern time than the timeline indicates. And Anatoly Fomenko found out a way of kind of creating an algorithm to see what stories were in fact the same times in history but told by different chroniclers. And how what they did was they took all these times recounting the same point in history, and instead of like different tellings in the same time zone, they took them and they stretched them backwards and created time in history that didn't exist.
Not only do we have missing time, we have rewritten time.
Yes. Yes.
Rewritten history.
Yes.
To the convenience of the agenda.
We do. And this has been a real eye-opener for me, because there are certain things when you go into your heart, you have that gnosis or that knowing, and you can kind of really feel it, in my opinion. So I'll put a link when this goes up to the New Earth, or actually when it goes up on the Mod Wiz channel, to the New Earth YouTube channel, and they really speak about the survivor culture, which is the culture that existed pre-cataclysmic. And when you see all of the megalithic works like Göbekli Tepe and things like that, this is all part of that higher culture that has been kind of lost and hidden. I think more and more we're starting to see that archaeology seems to be hiding things from us. And what they're hiding is that we have a long, rich history before this parasitic culture got established, and it's basically trying to erase our greatness.
Actually eroding the God spark.
Yes, eroding the God spark, exactly, because we have so much greatness behind us, and we're being told that it didn't exist, that we were in mud huts, and that civilization only got started, 4,000 years ago, and 10,000 years ago seems to be like a very conservative estimate of how long we've been great. I mean, the cataclysm happened about 12,000 years ago, and again, we have stories even from Plato about Atlantis, and speaking of this great culture that kind of itself went downhill. And in Tolkien's works, that island called Numenor, the reason the gods sunk it was because they tried to go the gods used to live on their own separate place that you could travel by the sea, and these men got so full of hubris they assailed the gods. Of course, they failed, and their island was sunk for the insult of even trying to do so. But we see that there is something that is not the God spark, that is almost an antithesis of it, that's anti-nature, anti-creator, and it's really a virus. And more people are starting to become aware of kind of a mind virus that is non-physical in nature. The Gnostics would call, the archons, or like kind of, from Gnostic literature, and of course now John Lash in modern Gnostic literature, that they kind of represent these mind viruses. Even the same mind virus could be identified as the jinn in Muslim, theology. And then you can go even further back into Zoroastrianism out of Persia, and then you'll have the Devas, and he didn't identify them as good or evil, although later Zoroastrianism did get into good and evil. The original primitive one from Zoroaster himself was that there was good counsel and bad counsel, and that we should only heed the good counsel and ignore the bad counsel. In other words, don't give them energy, just ignore them.
Well, little spoiler alert, folks, we win. However, that said, how we win is what it's coming down to. Do we want to do this gracefully and empowered, or do we kind of want to get and not hold backwards? We win, and what's happening right now is that people are becoming aware and being able to discern through what was previously the veil. The veil could be considered perhaps the technologies that have been used against humanity, just like in Lord of the Rings. They had all of these ploys to use against the elves and the hirelings and so on. Well, we are becoming aware. Some people call that waking up. That's just overused now, but this is exactly what is happening. So it comes down to actually taking the onus upon yourself and standing up to that force, not just heading for the high heels, but to come back, heading for the hills and joining with your fellow man and your fellow kin to stand up.
Yeah,
and take the high road.
Yes, I mean, we could, like you said, we could do this easy way by kind of just really using our God spark to really be aware of our environment, or we could wait until basically the enemy is at your doorstep and shocking you that, oh my God, they really are going to do bad things to us. And it really requires us to come together as an organism to resist this darkness. And as we spoke about in an earlier mystic view, one of the first ones I did with you, we were talking about, armies being equivalent to the immune system of a given organism, which would be a country, and how our armies seem to be all in other people's organisms. And as we now look at like the United States of America, and we see things getting really ugly, our military might actually be sharing the views that things are very wrong here, but they're not in the country. They're in the 100+ bases around the planet. So and since it's our government that deploys these troops, wouldn't it be really? It's very virus-like. That if a virus takes over an organism, in this case, the United States of America, and then takes its immune system and places it outside the organism in other organisms where they cause trouble there, but don't protect us here.
Well, what I just wanted to reiterate is that they're basically a parasite. They can kill the host, but they'll be eliminating themselves at the same time, or we can ditch the parasite.
Yes. Yes, they will ultimately
And how do we ditch the parasite is by reclaiming our God spark.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is, a lot of people, people who like Lord of the Rings really appreciate that Peter Jackson did such a, shall we say, loving job with it. But Peter Jackson ultimately is part of Hollywood. Hollywood is ultimately part of parasitic culture. And what's really telling is that he purposely left out a very important part in the closing of the book. It's called The Scouring of the Shire. And what happens is now in the movies, Saruman and Grima Wormtongue, his little Igor-like person, are killed earlier on in the book. And the hobbits return after becoming seasoned war veterans, they return to the Shire, and the Shire is all peaceful. But in fact, in the books, Saruman ends up going to the Shire and cutting down trees and starting industry and enslaving people. And when the hobbits come back from being seasoned war veterans and see what's going on, they use that knowledge, assemble the people, and throw them out. Now, of course, do some people die in the process? You're darn right, including both sides pay a price, but they scour the Shire. Now, Peter Jackson said he always found that chapter boring. I think the reason he took it out is because it's subversive to the parasitic agenda. Basically what it does is it plants the idea that war veterans coming home find that their country is under attack and assemble and do something about it. And so you can see, I really feel that Peter Jackson, as part of Hollywood and part of the parasitic culture, decided to leave out implanting an idea in our own eye that our soldiers could clean up the country. Do you agree with that, Shelley?
Well, I agree with that. And I think that maybe the only surprise will be to the people who think that the general population aren't aware of that, because there's a growing and advancing understanding that this is in fact what is happening. And there's a growing and advancing understanding that there is the military that are collectively uniting in support of humanity.
I mean, we do hear about the white hats from different.
The challenge goes on.
We hear about white hats from different sources of perhaps dubious nature. You know, we have Ben Fulford, we have the Drakes, we have the Cobras. All right, no, I mean these are you know, three people that I'm hardly going to quote, but there is a theme about white hats.
Right.
You know, and white hats in the Pentagon. And I believe that they do exist, but again, these white hats do not have their men in country, really, so to speak. Most of our men are out of country. And so it's kind of hard for them to do what they do when they don't have their own resources, which are basically men and equipment.
My point is that I want us to call upon our own inner white hat, for everyone's inner white hat to step forward.
And I agree with
where I'm going with that.
I agree with you totally, because
and they are in the country.
Yes, they are. Because in many ways, the military represents the cavalry has arrived. Somebody's going to save us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting
exactly.
Now, the interesting thing about cavalry, and everybody, oh, the cavalry has arrived. The whole thing about the cavalry is usually helping out the infantry that are already engaged. So to all those people who are waiting for the cavalry to arrive, I ask you, where is the infantry? We are the infantry, and we have not begun our work. So it's time for us to start doing things. And it doesn't mean going to war. This whole structure is dependent upon our labor and then the money that we give them back. So there's any number of not supporting the structure that can really be like the equivalent of artillery into their camp without having to fire a shot or hurt anybody. And these, I mean, the how we use our money. If you have a TV, if you're paying a subscription for a TV in your house and still allowing everybody to watch it, you're actually supporting that. If we all started canceling subscriptions to different things, I mean, the strategies are there. It's not really here for me, because every time one of us will put out a strategy, everybody goes, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Rather than like, ooh, I'm not, you know, that was a pretty good strategy, but I could improve it. Instead of questioning me, why don't just go and do your own improvements and get to work. So yes, with the white hat, we are the white hats, but we're currently sitting on our hands, and there really needs to be a strategy. I mean, there's all these forums all over the internet, and they're always talking about what they're doing. There's almost no discussion about what we're doing. Every once in a while, you'll see a video about some good work somewhere, some good work somewhere else, but nobody sees that and says, oh, I want to duplicate this. They just go, ooh, isn't it so nice? They're doing some things. Okay, next video. Oh, look what they're doing to us now. Our culture has become a spectator culture, and we need a participant culture. And until we start participating, we will be watching our own demise. That's what we can spectate on. So it's really time to start gathering together. I mean, you know that Shelley and I belong to Global Mission of Peace, which is love for all, hatred for none, and building what endures anew. It isn't about ripping down the old structure. If you just stop supporting it, it goes into decay. But we start building new communities, new strategies, different ways of trade and commerce that might be a lot less money-based. I mean, think of the word trade. What is trade? Trade means I have something, you have something, let's trade. Doesn't have to be really involve money. And I had a very interesting thought when I was just, trying to conceive. I mean, Shelley, I know that we often try to brainstorm. We try to get into new ways of doing things. And so, and money being kind of a problem of things, almost like a control system. Because yes?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just going to say exactly. It's not the money. It's how the money is used to condition us. It's how the money has been our interface to everything that we allegedly want or desire. So for many, it has become the equivalent of a god. Even if they don't think of it as their god, that's where they think of as their security, their love, their nourishment, whatever it is. They translate it first into money and then into the element that they think that they are desiring. So it's not so much about the money. However, it is the conditioning that we have permitted and no longer need to permit.
And
when we talk about trade as commerce, it's an entirely different story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where were you going with the trade story?
Well, the trade story was that you have to have something to trade. And so it's, so certain parts of the world certain countries seem to have better resources, and certain countries seem to be, like holes, just hard scrabble. Maybe you have really poor earth and it's just like, I can't even grow food, which this brings us to something like hemp and the prohibition against it, and how, let's say you belong to some country that really, maybe it's on the side, almost like, like very mountainous or whatever, that if you can get enough water to something and it doesn't require a lot, you can grow hemp. And the beauty of hemp is that it allows you to make rope. You have biomass to burn, which means you can create steam, which means you can create energy. It grows almost anywhere. You can get probably at least two good yields per year. You get as much, like, let's say you want to make paper, you get 4 times more paper making material from an acre of hemp than you do from an acre of trees. And you get that twice a year. Once you bring down the trees, you're just looking at empty space. So, I mean, I foresee ways of nations being able, like, who really don't have a lot of wherewithal, by using hemp. And then you have, like, I'm talking about like more the raw stuff. But now that science has added and seen all the polymers of hemp, I mean, hemp is basic. I mean, it's amazing what can be done with hemp. And I'm talking particularly about hemp and not about cannabis. I'm not talking so much about the psychoactive part of the plant. I'm talking about just the kind of like the stuff that the psychoactive people actually would consider garbage. But it just so happens that that garbage is gold. And the soil remediation. I mean, even if people would inherit like soil that's been destroyed by pesticides, after a few years of growing hemp there, the soil gets cleaned up. And as you're cleaning up the soil, you still have something that's tradable. And to me, when we start looking at laws from governments that prohibit the growing of things like hemp, to me, it's time for us not only to go back to our God spark, but go back to the fact that the majority of the planet adheres to some form of the books, from the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament to the Quran. So all of them will go back to the Old Testament and Genesis as legitimate pronouncements of God to humanity. And in there, God gives everything that grows to humanity. So anybody telling us that we can't grow something is inherently a demon standing between us and what God gave us. So I really think it's time for people to realize, and this can include everybody. I mean, even the most hardcore fundamentalist who often might have, certain, things like, oh, pot's bad or whatever. It's not about a judgment. God gave it to us. And no government can stand between us and nature without standing between us and God. And so we start to identify that anybody who would keep us from what grows from the earth is in fact acting demonically.
Those same demons are what gave us boundaries to divide and conquer. Boundaries did not come from God. The great creator did not give us boundaries.
Correct. I agree. So I'm trying to think if there's anything here I didn't cover yet. Because it's obviously we have a show. This conversation could go on forever. But some of the points I'm trying to make is that what's going on in the world today has been going on for 100 years easily. I think it actually goes back at least to the beginning of the printing press, when basically all the old books could be burned and officially approved history could then be printed en masse, given out, and then history could be rewritten. The printing press allowed old history to be burned and a new history to be written, and it didn't take a long time. This is no longer scribes. This is like boom, 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 boom. Here we go, boom, boom, boom. And you could and how quickly the takeover and the shaping of our psychological landscape could get changed by the Gutenberg Press. And I believe that was when history really turned south. Similarly, now some people have called the internet the new Gutenberg Press. It is. But fortunately, it's not just controlled by one group. There is good stuff coming out of this Gutenberg Press, but there's also the equivalent of what came out of the first Gutenberg Press, where, we live in a psychological world. I have spoken before, I experienced it myself before I started seeing it, that sometimes I would go into my nice warm bed and feel so miserable. And meanwhile, I'm in a warm bed. That just doesn't work. If you're comfortable and well fed, and meanwhile you think how miserable you are, and meanwhile there's people sleeping in boxes who aren't fed, you're not counting your blessings. And a big part of humanity's mistake and and what's wrong with us psychologically is we don't count our blessings. Most of us are far more blessed than we are cursed. And but we ignore the blessings and only look at, oh, this is happening, oh, poor me, and we go into a victim stance. And we're seeing a lot of that victimization going on. Matter of fact, to me, many of the new age and alternative forms are based in victimhood. Look what they're doing to us now, and that's victimhood. And everybody goes the 1%, the 99%. So how does 1% really control the 99%? They control their psychology. And that's why I really believe any benevolent off-worlders looking down on us just go, how can we intercede? I mean, it's not even a fair battle. They're losing it because they will to lose it. And if that's their will, who are we to go against their will? It's a free will planet. The 99% apparently, or most of them, will it that the 1% will rule them because they're doing nothing about it. They're not sitting down and forming strategies and tactics of what it looks like to basically roll over the 1%. The will to do something is not there. The will to complain is there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too cynical for you?
It's a little bit similar. No, it's not too cynical. It was just making me think of the 99%, right? And we all know that the greatest matter is in the 99.99% that we do not see.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So to harness that, even as energy, that is now also available to us as plasma energy. There is so much for us to simply stand up and claim. That's all.
I agree, and I think
And that probably brings us to good news.
I was just going to say the same thing, and we'll start with the energy good news. There have been
Yeah.
there have been recent articles that are going out, and we know that nuclear power plants are still being built. And we probably going, oh, this is terrible. And, Russia's offering to build nuclear power plants in South Africa and a few other places. The good news is these reactors, they're built by Rosatom, which is the Russian nuclear branch of government or a company. I think it's a company. And the reactors they're building are new reactors. I think they might be called breeder reactors. Maybe they're not, but what I've read about breeder reactors and thorium salt reactors are that they can burn what we now have as nuclear waste. They don't need uranium and plutonium. They can basically all the stuff that we're storing, like we hear about these leakages of the power, the storage of things and its poisoning environment. Well, what's poisoning our environment is the fuel for these reactors. And so in many ways, I mean, you can see where a country that needs electricity could kind of like approach Russia, say, can you build us one of these? And then we'll let the countries that are still producing the garbage pay us to dump their junk, their radioactive waste in our countries, because we're going to use it for fuel. I mean, I really see a brilliant strategy here, unless, of course, the other ones catch on. But you have to really wonder with our other conversation whether or not one of the reasons the radioactive waste is still sitting around is because it might be part of a depopulation agenda like the wars are. But the good news is that all these reactors that Russia's building burn nuclear waste for their fuel. These new energy-producing nuclear reactors will clean up the environment, and that's really good news.
So the other good news is about the refugees. Good news about the refugees. I just wanted to share that there's a large group of Syrian refugees here in Alberta that have reached out to help Alberta's refugees from the Fort McMurray fires and from the BC fires that have been so devastating. So having had the recent experience themselves, they are gathering together their limited resources and reaching out and helping all that they can that have now been evacuated from their homes or lost their homes and their land and their animals. And that's not the good news part. The good news part is how the Syrian refugees are reaching out to help our refugees from Fort McMurray and northern Alberta, northern British Columbia.
Okay, well, I'd like to follow up. Now, this story is from Press TV. Press TV is kind of like the official web news of Iran. And I can't really, people, if you want to get some news that's removed from kind of like the parasitic programming, now, of course, there's going to be bias. But bias is easy to read through when the facts aren't distorted. So anyway, this is from Press TV. And basically, the title is Refugees Welcome Project Helped Repopulate Italian Village. In a contradictory move to most European countries who are implementing strict border control to stem the influx of refugees on their soil, the mayor of a small Italian village has introduced a Refugees Welcome Project, which has started to spread to its neighbors. To quote the mayor, "We have been welcoming refugees with open arms for the past 15 years. They have saved our village," Mayor of Riace, Lucano Domenico, was quoted by Al Jazeera saying on Monday. The population of the village, located in Italy's southern Calabria region, dwindled from around 2,500 people to some 400 in the 1990s after financial pressures forced inhabitants to move north in search of better economic conditions. The basic idea of the program is to give refugees a home and a job and improve the local economy. This plan helps save the village. Now listen to this. It all started in 1908 when a ship carrying 218 Kurdish refugees washed up on the village's beaches. The resourceful mayor, who saw the incident as a blessing, proposed that the asylum seekers take up residence in the homes vacated by the former villagers. Currently, about 2,500 of the people from 20 different nationalities are living in the village, which has reopened many of its shops, has even set up its own school. So, I mean, listen, we all are aware in our country, we see all these houses in foreclosure because people have deserted. And we have homeless people. Do we see homeless people in these places? No, we see them in boxes. So, I mean, and so this is a mayor who had the foresight of like, these are just empty things doing nothing. He put the refugees in there. They had a place to live. And once they got grounded, they got productive, because most people in the world actually are productive and want to do things. And especially if you receive people with love, they want to pay back. They're going, oh my God, look what these people did for us. And they will be inspired to give back. And that's exactly what happened here. So that's the good news. So that would conclude.
That's really great news.
I know. I really enjoyed that story. And really the story started with the foresight, wisdom, and love of one man, that mayor. He saw this as an opportunity, and he took that opportunity and made it work. And so again, psychology is everything. There's different ways of looking at that, and he saw the win and went for it, and it turned out to be win-win. Because that's when you do things, both sides win. That's how you know you're doing things right. All right, Shelley, thank you for another really wonderful show, Mystic View 19. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us on GMOP TV. This is Mystic View 19, and we'll see you next time. God bless.